Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar this morning. We still have quite a few people, it looks like, that are signing in at this point, so we'll wait just another minute or so before we get started. Okay, everyone, we'll go ahead and get started. If this is your first time on one of the webinars or you don't recognize the voice from previous ones, this is Britt Davis. I'm one of the automation managers for IDEC based out of Cincinnati. And today what we are going to be talking about is how to set up user accounts and use passwords on the HMIs. So like Elias showed yesterday, we do have these scheduled out now through Friday, May 1st. Here's a listing showing just what's coming up. Obviously, we are here today on the 15th, here with user accounts. Tomorrow, we'll be going over animation. And on Friday, we'll be going over how to use and build recipes in the HMI. Recipes are, and you can think of it just like cooking recipes, because that's really, in essence, what they are. Just think of an Excel spreadsheet. If each column represents a part that you need to make, maybe you've got 10 parameters that go into making that part, 10 adjustments, 10 settings, maybe 15, maybe 20, maybe more. But if you think of each column as a part and the settings for those parts, recipes just allow you to store all that data, all that setup, that configuration data, really wherever you want within the HMI on an SD card, and then transfer the running data down to the PLC whenever you need to go from part 1 to part 2, for example. Then next week, we're going to go back into some of the PLC topics. Like Elias mentioned, we're going to redo the webinar we did on Modbus communications on Monday. Then we'll get into some more of the basic stuff. We'll go over setting up the PLC, how to map your digital I/O, how to map your analog I/O. On the 22nd, we'll go over some basic circuitry, some start-stop circuits, latches, unlatches, some things like that. Then timers, counters. That'll wrap up that week. Then the following week, we'll get into doing some move instructions and show how to move data around the PLC. We'll go over the device data list and some advanced math instructions. And then we'll finish up that week with some basic HMI stuff. Again, starting an HMI project from scratch, how you pick the communications driver that you want to use, as well as doing some basic push buttons and basic pile lights. We'll continue that the following day with some more basic objects. And then finally on Friday the 1st, we'll get into some advanced configuration. All of these webinars are being recorded, and we are posting them to our YouTube channel. And you guys can see the link there. Also, after these webinars are over and we kind of get everything collected for each particular topic, you guys will get a copy of the presentation, a copy of the program, and a question and answer document. We'll put all that on our cloud server, and then our Marcom folks will be sending out an email just to let you know that that's available. You can go and download it. That usually takes a couple of days after the webinar is over, so just for our folks to be able to process the videos and for us to be able to go back through all the questions and answers and put them in a legible format for you guys. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to be looking at coming up. Just like always, if you have a question, please click the questions drop down and type in your question and hit send. We will do a Q&A session at the end of the webinar, just like we always do. All right, so let's get started. So setting up user accounts, and again, we're going to be using Window Y in v4. That is the programming software that we use for all of the current series of our touchscreens. So the way to set up user accounts is if you go into the project window, if you double click on user accounts, that'll pop up the security dialog box. And you can see within there, you've got two tabs. You've got a general tab and an options tab. Now in the general tab, you can see to enable passwords, to use the security functions, all you need to do is click on that checkbox. The default username for any HMI program is user with a capital U with no password. Okay, I'll show you guys that here in a little bit. If you click on the options tab, again, we've not clicked on use security functions. This is just what comes standard. If you click on the options tab, you do have the ability to set a password for opening your project. So in other words, if I click on, if I'm in that second little dialog box, this options box, and if I click on the checkbox, it says use password to open project. I can type in a password there. If I save the project and close it, then whenever I go to open it again, it's going to prompt me for that password. So I won't be able to open the project unless I know the password. It's just one way you can password protect your HMI program. All right. So once we do click on that little use security functions checkbox, this is kind of what we're looking at. Okay, like I mentioned, the default user has a username of user with a capital U, no password. By default, they are also assigned to all three of the built-in security groups. And we've got three groups built in. We'll look at what you can do with each one of those when we actually get into the software in a little bit. But there are three groups. There's an administrator group, an operator group, and a reader group. So from right within this tab, we can add additional users. We can have a total of 15. We can also add an additional 12 security groups, custom groups, and we're going to do this. We're not going to do 12, we'll do 1 or 2. You guys will get the idea. But we can have up to 15 total security groups. So again, you can have up to 15 total users, up to 15 total security groups. Okay. All right. So if we want to add a user, okay, we basically just go ahead and click on the add button. We can specify the user number. You can see there in the top left corner, we've got number and it just goes to 2. The default user is user, and that's user number 1. You can delete that one if you want. You don't have to have that as a default. I typically leave it just for example's sake, but you can delete the default user and create your own. So if we go to create a user, the password can be up to 15 characters, alphanumeric. The password is case sensitive as well, and you can see an example there. I put in my password 1 with a capital M and a capital P. You also do have the ability within the software as you're typing in the password to either show it or hide it. So you have that option. So if you hide the password as you're typing it in, it will just show up here in the dialog box as asterisk. So if somebody's walking by, they can't kind of peek over your shoulder and see what you're typing in. All right. Now, once we create a new user, you can assign that user to an existing security group. And what we're showing there are the 3 default groups. Or you can create your own security group just by clicking on the add button. Now, once you create a security group, once I click that add button, I'll be able to pick a group number. Again, since I've already got 3, it starts with number 4 for the group. And again, I can change that to another number if I want. I can give it a group name, and in this example, I'm going to use maintenance. Okay. Now, you'll see an example here of the screen capture where it shows all of these different operations and then the permissions. Whenever we create a security group, we have the ability to adjust the top 3, whether or not this group can open projects, whether they can download projects to the HMI, or whether they can upload projects from the HMI. That's what we can specify. There's a whole bunch of other ways we can use this group that you guys will see, but within these default operations that we have, these system operations, if you will, those are the only 3 that we can modify based on user-created groups. All the rest of these will be adjusted based on the default system groups: administrator, operator, and reader. And again, we'll look at that when we get into the software. All right, some of the options that we've got within the security dialog box. Again, the one there at the very top where it says use password to open project, we've talked about that. The next one down is change user by device address. What that is you can specify a register. It can be a register within the HMI, a local data register internal to the HMI. It can be a data register in the PLC or the control device that the HMI is attached to, either way. But what that lets you do is you can change who is logged into the system just by changing the number in that register. And we'll look at that. The next one down is store the current logged in username to a device address. In other words, this is going to show you in a series of registers the name of who is logged into the system. We'll look at that as well. The next one down is back to default user after a certain amount of time. One of the things that we are able to set up is a default user. That's somebody that gets automatically logged into the system when the HMI powers up. You don't have to use that. You can leave the default user as nobody. That way there's nobody that's automatically logged in. What this setting will let you do is it'll go back to the default user after so many minutes of inactivity on the HMI. If you set this down to 0 minutes, for example, what that'll let you do is, let's say we have one screen that is password protected by maybe somebody in the supervisors group. Somebody in the supervisors group logs on. They go to that password protected screen, do whatever they need to do, and they get back off of it. If we have this set to 0 minutes and they say, oh, hang on, there was something else I needed to do. I need to get back into that screen. It's going to prompt them to enter their password again, okay? So if it's set to 0 minutes, you basically have no time once you get off a password protected screen. If you try to go back in, you have to re-enter your password. If you set this to anything other than 0 minutes, then you've got a little bit of time to bounce around the system and do some things without having to enter your password again. All right, the next one is check the status of the password entry. Basically, that's a register that will give you a value as to, was the password entered correctly? Was it incorrect? Was it canceled? We'll take a look at that. You also have the ability to customize the password input screens if you want. So you can make it whatever size you want, put whatever keys you want on your password screen. If you want to change it, you can. You've also got the option to open the password screen where it will prompt you to select a username and enter a password automatically based on certain operations. Operating a part, in other words, if I push a button and try to go to a password protected screen, if I click that operate part object checkbox, it'll automatically pop up a login screen for me. Okay. You can, same thing if you're trying to change screens, or you can also have it set up so that if I am trying to change screens and I enter the password correctly to allow access to that screen, it'll automatically go ahead and go to that screen. I don't have to hit a go to button again. The last little checkbox within that section there is report when an unauthorized user operates a part or an object. And what that is if you've got things that are password protected on the screen and somebody is not logged in to use those objects and they still try to do it, it'll pop up. That'll basically be a bit that you can set that'll pop up whatever you want. It could be a text message or what have you that says, hey, you're not allowed to do that. Please log in, or whatever it is you want it to say. And then down there at the very bottom left corner where it says show passwords, that's the checkbox I was talking about on an earlier slide where you can turn it on or turn it off to see the passwords that you've got enabled in your project. All right, let's do some examples here. Let's go into Window I NV4. And let's make sure, yeah, looks like everybody can still see my screen. Bear with me, I forgot to turn off my VPN connection to my email. Turn that off so we're not seeing all that stuff pop up. All right. So we're in Window I NV4. And what I've got here is just a really simple project. It's 3 screens, and we're set up passwords to be able to control and access different things in these screens. So the first one that I've got here is screen 1. This is my main menu. And you can see I've got the IDEC logo. It's just a part that I import, just a picture here that I imported. I've got a calendar object just showing the time. Again, I'm in Cincinnati, so it's about 11:15. Those objects are here in data displays. That's a calendar object. That's what I used. And again, when we do some of the basic, more basic HMI webinars, we'll show you guys how to do all these different objects. This where it says Part Master 3000 is nothing more than static text. And these 2 buttons here, Machine Control and Supervisors, are simply go to screen buttons. Okay? My Machine Control button will try to take me to screen number 2. You can see Machine Control over here in my project window. I've got base screen number 2, that's Machine Control. And likewise, this Supervisors button here will simply try to take me to base screen 3. And again, these are just go to screen buttons. All right? So that's my main screen. On my Machine Control screen, I've got the IDEC logo there. I've got some text that says Machine Control. I've got a couple of bit buttons, just a start button and a stop button, and a button that tells me if my process is on or if it's off. And this is just a little simple parts counter. These 2 buttons are just bit buttons right here. And a bit button is what you think, that it allows you to control a bit. And in this case, this one is controlling internal relay M1 in my PLC, and it's acting like a momentary push button. Similarly, this stop button here is the same. It's acting like a momentary push button, and it is controlling internal relay M2 in my PLC. This little circle here is just a simple pilot lamp. That's under lamps and pilot lamp. And this will basically look at internal relay M0. And when it's on, it'll be green. When it's off, it'll be red. And I've also got it to show some different text. When it's off, it'll say process off. When it's on, it will say process on. And again, we'll go over how to create all these basic objects in a different webinar. Up here, I've got a parts counter. This is just a numerical display reading the value of a counter, the current value of counter 0 from my PLC. And numeric displays are here under data displays, and down to the bottom there, numerical display. And these are all the same thing as well, basically just reading additional data so I can see how long my machine has been running. Down at the bottom, I've got these 3 buttons are go to screen buttons to go back to my home screen or to try to go to the supervisor screen. My login button here, this is also a go to screen button, but it's just got a different action. So instead of going to a particular base screen, it's doing an action of open the password screen. That's the login screen. Whoops, I hit my keyboard. So that's what that button does. And we'll look at more of what these things over here do as we set up the passwords. Okay. Then on screen 3, that's my supervisor screen. And we'll set this screen up to be password protected so that only people in the supervisor's group can have access to the screen. Again, I've got a home button. It's a go to screen button to take me back to my main menu. I've got some things over here that we'll go over once we set up passwords. This will show who's logged into the system and also allow me to change who's logged in by adjusting a value in a register, like we talked about a little bit ago. And I've got this change user settings button. What that is, it's also a go to screen button that opens the user account settings screen. and we'll go over this. What this lets you do is you can go in and change basically information about the people who have passwords set up in the system. And we'll go over that so you guys can see what that is. It basically lets you either you can change people's passwords, you can delete users from the system, you can add users to the system, and we'll actually do that. All right. So those are my 3 screens. Nothing too fancy, just some basic stuff. The PLC program that I've got doing this little bit of control up here, let me show you that. Again, this is the program that's running in there. It's a simple start, stop circuit, easy for me to say. Again, those 2 buttons, the start button and stop button that I have created are controlling those 2 internal relays. The pilot light is just checking to see if M0 is on or not. And where I was showing my parts counter, basically if my machine is running, I'm saying I can make a part every second. I got a really fast machine, I guess. And then that's going to counter C0. And that's really it. Oh, and I do have a subroutine 0 that is basically doing an hour meter calculation. So as long as I am in process, I'm using an hour meter to store the hours, minutes, and seconds in D100, D101, and D102. And that's it. All right. So let's go ahead and do some password configuration. Let's see how this works. Okay. So again, to set up passwords, I need to be here in my project window. I go down to where it says user accounts, about 3/4 of the way down that list. Double click on that, and that's going to open that security dialog box. Again, the default username and password is user with a capital U, no password. I'm going to leave that the way it is. I'm fine with that. Again, you can change this. Okay. I am going to go ahead and click on this show passwords box down at the bottom just so I can see what I'm typing in to make it easier for myself. And if I want to start adding users, I need to click this use security functions checkbox. Again, the default user is user number 1, automatically assigned to the 3 default security groups, administrator, operator, and reader. I'll leave that alone. Now let me go ahead and I'll start creating or adding some users. I click the add button here. It'll go to user number 2. And down here I can specify the user name. Let me make that me. I'll make me a user, Brit. And I'll give myself a password of 222222. I got 222222. Okay, so 6 2s. Hopefully I can remember that. Now if I click on this group membership tab, again, here's where I can assign, let me get rid of these 2 groups here. I've already got a couple of the groups that I created. I can assign anyone, I can assign myself to those 3 default groups. I'd created already these 2 groups, maintenance and supervisors. Let me show you how to add a group. It's real simple. If I want to click add, okay, that's going to open up the security settings. I can click add down here to add a group. Again, when I create a custom group, I can specify the group number. I can give it a name, test group or what have you. And again, the only thing that I can modify from a system operation standpoint is whether this group can open projects, download projects, or upload projects. Okay? All of these other items here are fixed based on the default system security groups. Okay? And let's take a look at all of those so you can see for the default 3 groups what they can do. Okay? The administrator, you can see, and these are all the system options, they can do everything. The administrator can open projects, download projects, upload projects. They can delete all the data in the HMI. They can upload and download files to and from an external memory device, an SD card, for example. They can download files to that external device while the touchscreen is running in operation. They can download PLC programs through the HMI from an external device, which is one of the things you can do. They can upload PLC programs. They can delete files in the external memory device. They can format the external memory device. They can copy files to an SD card, a USB drive. They can change the system operation mode. They can use device monitor. They can remotely monitor and control the HMI from a web browser. So again, these are all the default system operations. The administrator, they can do everything. Okay? An operator. Basically what an operator is allowed to do, you come down through here, they can upload files from an external memory device. They can download files to that external memory device. They can copy files to an SD card or a flash drive. They can use the device monitor, and they can remotely monitor or control the HMI. That's an operator. A reader is a lot more restricted. The reader group can upload files from an external memory device. They can copy files to a flash drive. They can remotely monitor the HMI. They can't remotely control. Okay, and again, those are the three default system groups. These other groups that I create, right, like I've got a maintenance group, a supervisor group, and I just created a test group. Again, in any of those three that we created, the only three things that we can change are up here, these top three. So I'm going to say in the maintenance group, they can't open projects, they can't download, they can't upload. They can't do any of that. The supervisors group, okay, maybe I want to allow somebody that's a supervisor to open a project, download a project, and upload a project, okay? So again, I can change any of these three permissions here just by double clicking on them. It'll toggle back and forth, okay? So those are all of the default system operation options that you've got and who's assigned to them and what we can control. All right. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to assign myself here to the maintenance group. So I'm going to click on the group name, click on copy. Now I'm in the maintenance group. If I wanted to add myself to any additional groups, I could do that. Just click on the group name and again, copy it over. For this application, this is fine. I'm in the maintenance group. All right. If I click OK, I just created user number 2. Let me go and create a couple more. Let me add one more. I'll add user number 3 here. We'll make this Elias, and we'll give Elias a password of 333333. Click on group membership. We'll say Elias is also a member of the maintenance group. Okay. So I've created 2 users. Me and Elias, we're both in the maintenance group. Let me go ahead and create one more. This will be user 4, and this will be our boss, Rajiv. We'll give him a password of 444444. And for group membership, we'll make him a member of a few different groups. Maybe Rajiv's an administrator. He can do everything on the HMI that is allowed. Okay. And we'll also make Rajiv a member of the maintenance group. And we'll make him a member of the supervisors group. Excuse me. So Rajiv is a member of those 3 groups. And I can see that here in my screen. Good enough for now. So in addition to the default user there, I've got myself, Elias, as members of the maintenance group, and Rajiv is a member of administrator, maintenance, and supervisor. And down here, I've got the default user of nobody. So no one is automatically logged into the system. If I wanted to change that, I could just by clicking on the drop-down and selecting a user. I'll leave it at none. All right, let's go take a look at this options tab. We looked at this in the PowerPoint. I'm going to leave use password to open a project, I'll leave that disabled. That way you guys don't have to put in a password when you guys get this program to open it. I am going to change the user by device, and I'm going to use here, if I don't know the address I want to use, I can click on this little three-dotted button out here, this ellipsis button. And again, I can pick data from the HMI. My target is micro I, my touchscreen. I have local data registers in there, right? Just like I have data registers in the PLC. Or I'd set this up to also talk to an IDEC PLC, so I could also use data registers in the PLC if I wanted. For this example, I'm just going to use a register in the HMI. I'll use local data register 0. Okay. So whatever number I write into local data register 0 is going to actually change who is logged in to the system. I also want to store the current logged in username to a device address. I'm going to show that on the screen so I can see who's logged in. And I'm going to start this at local data register 20. And you can see this uses 9 consecutive registers. Okay, so I'm using local data register 20 through local data register 28. I'll set my back to default user. Maybe I'll set that to be a minute. I'll go ahead and enable this, check the status of the password entry. I'll use local data register 30. And again, I'm just picking these data register numbers, at random. These could have been any numbers. So that's good. I won't customize my password input screen. I'll leave that alone. Down below, I will have it open the password screen automatically if I click on a part that is password protected, or if I try to change the screen and go to a password protected screen. All right, I'm good with that. That's good enough for my setup. So I click OK. Now I've got password set up and enabled in my program. Okay. All right, so let me go here to screen 2, my machine control. And I told you we were going to go over some of these after we enabled passwords, so these will make more sense. Okay. Again, that login button is simply a go to screen button that's going to open my password screen to allow me to try to log in. That's all that button does. Who's logged in here, you can see this is basically just a character string. And again, this is going to start with LDR20. Okay. Under my data format here, I'm showing 18 digits or 18 characters. You can have up to, well, you can have 2 characters per register. Okay. So since I've got 9 registers that I'm using, I can show 18. Now, this is a character input. I don't want it to be an input. This is just a display only. We don't have a character display object, but what you can do is if you set the trigger condition to something that will never be true. For example, here I've got an input condition. In other words, when am I allowed to press this object and change it? That's the input condition. I've got this set to a trigger type of while satisfying this condition when 0 equals 1. Since that's never going to be the case, this is always going to be just a display only object for me. So I can do a character display. Okay. So that's what that is. That's going to show the name of who is logged in right there. This password entry status box is a message switching display that I'm using to look at the value of local data register 30. And remember, local data register 30 comes from our password setup here. I'm going to check the status of the password entry. So based on the number in LDR 30, I'm using this message switching display here to actually put some text up here on the screen. So when I have a value of 1 in LDR 30, that means the password that was entered is correct. When I have a value of 2, I'm putting in a message of try again, Bubba. means the password was wrong. Again, this is just text I'm using. You can change this to whatever you want. If I have a value of 4 or a value of 6, that means the password entry was canceled. Okay. So based on the value in LDR30, I'm just going to show those different messages in this password entry status box. Down below that, this is just a numerical input that will also allow me to change the value in LDR30. So it's going to show the value. I could have made this a display as well if I wanted. So that'll show the numerical value of LDR30. This will just show a message based on that value. Okay. All right. Now if I go to the supervisor's base screen, excuse me. Again, this change user settings button is a go to screen button that will open the user account settings screen on the touchscreen. We'll go over that. This who's logged in, this is another character input that is looking at LDR20. Okay. And again, LDR20 comes from our user account settings right here. So whoever is logged in, their name will be shown in data registers, local data registers starting with 20. So that's what this is, LDR20. I'm just going to show the characters. I'm going to show who's logged in right there. Now, these objects over here allow me to change who is logged into the system. Okay, again, LDR0, based on the number that is in LDR0, will allow me to change who's logged in. And that's coming from right here. So the user number, if I write a 1 in there, user 1 is logged in. If I write a 2 in there, Britt's logged in. 3, Elias. 4, Rajiv. Okay. And these two buttons here are simply word buttons. Right here, they're word buttons. The one that goes down basically takes the value in local data register 0, subtracts 1, and stores it back in local data register 0. Right? This is just doing some math, doing a subtraction. Likewise, this green up button doing the same basic thing, but it's adding 1. So it's doing an add of LDR0 and a value of 1 and storing it in LDR0. So it's basically incrementing and decrementing this data register. All right? That's my HMI screen. Okay. Now, the only other thing I do want to do is I do want to password protect screen number 3 here. Okay. So if I want to password protect this screen, I can go to the screen properties. The easiest way to get to the properties of any screen is if you're on that screen, just double click wherever you don't have an object. That'll open up this screen properties box. Okay. The other way to get to it is go to your project window and you can right click on the screen that you're interested in and go to properties. Do the same thing. Okay. I can then go into the security section for that screen number and I can choose who has access to this screen. Okay. Do the administrator group get access? The operators, the readers, the maintenance group, supervisors group, test group? What group can access this screen? Maybe I want to make it so just the supervisors group can get access to this screen. And again, these are just double clickable things over here in this display column. Okay. Again, I double click on it once to change it, double click it again to change it back. So again, only people in the supervisors group will be able to access this screen. Nobody else. All right. I'm good with that. Okay. So I can save my program, save my project file, and let me go ahead and download this to my touchscreen here. And I'm connected to this touchscreen over Ethernet. I want to download everything. And this is the IP address of the touchscreen I'm downloading to. Let me double check one thing just to make sure in my project settings that I've got the IP address with the touchscreen and everything configured in here. I do. Okay, good enough. And again, we'll go over all this basic setup information when we do the project configuration webinar for the HMIs. Go ahead and download. And okay. Yep. I did have a password on the HMI already, on the one that I was downloading to, so I had to put that password in. And again, it was just the default. I'd left it the same, user, capital U, with no password. So this is going to download everything that I need for my program, my project, downloading all the graphics, all the buttons, all the screens, and all of the communication driver and everything that it needs to talk to the IDEC PLC. It's downloaded, it's complete. Now what I want to do is, like Elias did yesterday, let me show you guys my screen through the remote control and monitor capability of the touchscreen. And let me just type in the IP address of my touchscreen, which is 192.168.10.235. User with no password, and now I can control my touchscreen from a browser just like I was sitting in front of it, which I am sitting in front of it, but you can't see my screen unless I show you this. So again, this is my touchscreen, right? I have my two buttons to go to machine control and the supervisor screen. If I go to machine control here, you can see I can start and stop my process. Right now it's stopped. There's my machine runtime. There's the number of parts that I made. If I click my start button, my process starts, my hour meter starts adding up, and I start making parts. Okay. Now down here at the bottom, this shows our password information. If you remember, we had it set up so that nobody was logged into the system by default. So that's what it's showing. Nobody is logged in, and it's showing a number 0. That's the user number. There's no user 0, right? It starts at 1. The default user was user with a user number of 1. So there's nobody logged into the system. Okay. If I want to try to log in, I can hit this login button, and that will open up this password screen, allowing me to pick a user that I want to log in. Okay. I cancel that. It'll show me here my password entry status. You remember this switching message display that we set up? It shows canceled, and there's the numerical value that's associated with this message, just so you can see that. And again, nobody's logged in. If I click on this supervisors button, again, that's a go to screen button that tries to take me to screen 3, my supervisor screen. You remember we just password protected that, right? And we said that only someone in the supervisors group can try to log in to get to that screen. Well, in our application here, Rajiv is the only one assigned to the supervisors group. So because of that, he's the only one that shows up in this list. I don't show up, Elias doesn't show up. We can't try to log in. Now, we can sit here and try to guess Rajiv's password if we want. We can do that all day long, right? But if I try to put in his password that's not right, you can see down here towards the bottom right, my password entry status says, hey, try again, Bubba. Password entry code of 2 basically means the password was wrong. And again, nobody's logged in, right? So if I don't enter the correct password, it's not going to take me to that screen. Okay. All right. So let me go ahead and try. I'll hit that supervisors button again. If I can remember, I think Rajiv had a password of 444444. If I hit enter, assuming I entered his password correctly, that should take me automatically to screen 3, and it does. So again, I can see on this screen, this is my supervisor screen, I can see who's logged in. Again, that's that character display showing the value from LDR20 just as a character. So we're showing Rajiv is logged in, right? Now I'm on the supervisor screen, so if I want to click this Change User Settings button, what this is going to do is bring up another box that allows me to choose what user ID I want to work with. I want to adjust aliases, Brits, the default user, okay? And you can see it will show you the user ID number, the username, their password. It will also show the security groups that they're assigned to. Okay. Now, if I want to, let's say I want to edit some information about me. I click this edit button, okay. I can go in here, I can click on where it says password. I can change my password to something completely different. I can change the groups that I am associated with, okay? I can also change the name if it's not Brit, right? If I'm working somewhere and I got fired and Bob replaced me, I could have changed this username to Bob, changed that password, right? I could have done that. I can also add and delete users. Okay, so if I wanted to delete me, I could do that just by hitting this delete button. Let's say I want to add somebody. Okay, click the add button. By default, it's going to go to the next available user ID. Right, the last user ID number that we had was 4, was Rajiv. So the next one on the list is 5. I can give it a username. Maybe this is Steve. Make Steve a user. Click on password here. I'll give Steve a password. We'll make Steve's password 555 555. Again, if I want to see that, I can click this little show button and it'll show me the password that I put in for him. Hit enter. And I can now go down here and assign Steve to whatever security groups I want. So maybe Steve is also in the supervisors group, and maybe he's also in the maintenance group. Okay, so I've just added a user, Steve, with that password and assigned him to the maintenance group and the supervisors group. I click OK, says it was successful, click OK. Now Steve is a user that I can actually scroll through and see and log in within my system. Okay, so again, this just allows you to add users, delete users, modify user accounts right from the touchscreen. You don't necessarily have to go back into the software, make the changes there, download it to the HMI. Okay. Now, something else that's important to keep in mind, any changes that you make like this on the HMI do become part of the project file on the HMI. So if I were to go now and upload that program out of the HMI, I'm going to have Steve as user number 5. That information is now part of that project. Okay. All right. Now, these buttons over here, again, this just allows me to change who's logged into the system currently, right? I added Steve, so if I hit the up button, Steve should show up here as being logged in. Right? And again, just by clicking the down arrow, or that was a numerical input field, I can just simply type in the user number that I want to log in. User 1 was user. User 0 is nobody, right? So this is a way you can adjust who's logged in. Again, this could be done dynamically in the PLC, for example. Maybe based on the time of the day of the week, you want to adjust who is logged into the system. You can do that, right? Just do a compare instruction of the real-time clock data and move a value into that register. Again, we would need to make that a data register in the PLC, not a local data register on the HMI. But you get the idea. That could be done. All right. Now, let me go ahead and put this back to Rajiv as being the person who is logged in, since he was in, or Steve, doesn't matter. They're in the either one, they're both in the supervisors group, so they should be able to get to this screen. Okay. If I go back home, Now, if I try to go to that supervisors group, I can still get back in. Remember, I gave myself 1 minute to bounce around, right? So I don't have to enter my password again. If I change this to somebody who's not in the supervisors group, like me, right? I'm in the maintenance group. Okay. Now, if I try to go to that screen, that supervisor screen, again, that's password protected. Only people in the supervisors group have the ability to try to log in. So Steve and Rajiv have that ability. Elias and I don't. Again, we can try to guess their password all day long, but we can't access those screens. Okay. All right. One other thing I want to make sure that I show you in the software is this was an example of password protecting from screen to screen, right? And we've done that. You also have the ability to password protect at the object level. In other words, I can pick any object on any screen, double click on it to edit it. Once I enable passwords like we've done, I will have this security tab up at the top on every object. So on each object, I can choose what groups have access to display that can actually see this object. So in other words, if I say only people in the maintenance group and supervisors group, they have to be logged in for this object to be displayed, right? If somebody in the administrative group is logged in, this object doesn't even show up on the screen. It disappears, right? It's not displayed for them. Input is the ability to actuate or activate an object. Again, I can push the button. I can push the numerical input field to change the value. You can also change who has the ability to input or activate that object as well, okay? So again, I just want to show you this so you knew about it. So not only can you password protect from screen to screen, you can password protect down to the individual object level and show or hide objects based on the group that is currently logged in to the system. All right. In a nutshell, those are passwords. Now, what I'll go ahead and do is go take a look at the questions here. If we have any, it looks like we got a couple. Let's see, the questions we have. If a password protected screen is open and the authorized user times out from inactivity, can you recommend a simple way to automatically exit that protected screen? Yeah, I can. It's a little bit involved. It's not terribly difficult, but it goes above and beyond kind of the simple stuff that we're doing, but I can certainly show you that. One of the things that we have the ability to do, like we've looked at, we can tell who's logged into the system by a register, right? In our project settings, and this is something we'll go over when we do more of the advanced HMI configuration, we'll get into this more. One of the things we have is something called a system area. The system area is just a set of continuous registers. Just like when we said we were going to use a character input to show who was logged into the system, that used 9 consecutive registers, right? The system area is something similar. It uses a certain amount of consecutive registers. The very first register in the system area, for example, if we start this, let's say at, maybe I'm using a register in the PLC, data register 50, for example. Whatever register we specify here is the screen number register. In other words, in this example, D50, data register D50, will store the value of the screen that is currently showing on the HMI. We can also write to that register to force the HMI to go to a different screen. Okay. So what you can do is in the PLC, you can say, you can check to see who is logged in and are they on a password protected screen that you don't want them to be on. And based on that, you can start a timer. And after that timer elapses, you can either log that person out of the system automatically by moving a 0 into the who's logged in register. You can also change the screen number in D50 to a different screen, maybe screen 1 to go to the main menu, for example. But that's how you would do it. Like I said, it's not it's not overly complicated, but it's not just as simple as clicking a couple of buttons. There's a little bit of logic you've got to write in order to do that. Let's see. Another question is, how does that hour meter work for tracking machine runtime? Basically, all I've got here on this machine control screen, these are three numerical numerical display objects. And they're looking at, let me show you. Oh, I'm doing something funky in here. I'm mapping this. I'm going to show you guys how to do Modbus communications too, with having an HMI be able to talk to more than one intelligent device, more than one protocol at a time. So those are showing Modbus registers, so that's going to be confusing. So I won't go into that. But suffice it to say, what these are doing is just showing the values coming out of the PLC here. They're showing D100, D101, D102. That's all they're doing. So what I'm doing is whenever my machine is in process, and I'm getting that start process bit from my start-stop circuit here. So whenever that bit is on, for example, if I monitor the PLC, let me go and monitor this. You guys can see it. So when I'm in process, right, what's going to be happening is these data registers, and I'll show you this so you can see I'm not doing smoke and mirrors on you. We make a custom dialog box here to look at D100, D101, and D102. So this is showing the hours, the minutes, and the seconds of the runtime, my machine runtime. So what I'm saying is I'm assuming I can make a part every minute. So I'm using that 1 second clock. And as long as my start process bit is on, my counter will increment basically once a second. And that's what I'm seeing here for that hour meter. It's showing the hours, minutes, and seconds, D100, 101, 102, 315. You can see it's 3 hours, 15 minutes, and some odd seconds. And if I go back to my touch screen here, you can see that's basically the same thing it's showing there, hours, minutes, and seconds. So again, that's all I'm doing is taking the real-time clock, or not the real-time clock rather, but just that hour meter out of the PLC. All right. A couple other questions. How do you set the real-time clock in the PLC? Those have, in the PLC, there are special data registers that'll let you do that. Let me show you guys that. Special data registers. So in the PLC, we've got special data registers. And again, those start at the 8,000 level. And you've got special data registers that store the current value, the read-only value of the real-time clock. And it will show the year, the month, the day of the week, hour, minute, and second. And you've also got registers that you can write to, write only. And those start at D8015. And again, the year, the month, the day of the week, the hour, the minute, and the second. Okay. If you're going to adjust the real-time clock, I recommend that you write to all of those registers and update your clock accordingly. Okay. So you would just write the values you want into those registers. And there is also, I believe, a special internal relay that we have to trigger to update the clock. Let me check this. Yeah, special internal relay M8016. What that will do is once we write the updated values we want into those clock registers, starting with D8015 that we just looked at, when we turn on M8016, that's going to push that data from the write registers into the working registers, the actual real-time clock register. Okay. So that's how you would do it. Okay. Let's see, how do you set the date and time from a clock server? Yeah. So if you want to set the real-time clock using a time server on the internet, a couple things. One, you've got to make sure that your PLC can get out to the real world. In this case, I'm using an FC6A Plus, a 16 IO. So if I go into port 1 settings, excuse me, you can see these are the IP addresses that I'm using for that port. It's 192.168.10.236. That's my subnet mask. The default gateway, which this is just the IP address of my router here in my house, 192.168.10.1. I've specified the domain name servers that I'm using, and these are actually Yahoo domain name servers. They're free. Anybody can use them. But if you want to acquire the date and time from a time server, you just go down to where it says SNTP settings. Click on acquire the current date and time from a server. You can specify a time server by the IP address or by just the host name. You need to enter the server port number. And if you look up time servers, there's a whole bunch of public time servers that are free that you can use. They'll publish this information. They'll give you the port number information as well as their host name and their fixed IP address. You just specify the time zone that that server happens to be in. And if you want it to do it automatically, turn on automatic acquisition. You can choose, does it do it cyclically? Does it do it on PLC power up? If you do it cyclically, you can choose, is it every 10 minutes, every hour, every day, every week, every 30 days? So it'll go out and automatically grab the data from server and populate the real-time clock for you automatically. You don't have to manually go in and set it. So if you've got your PLC on a network that has access to the outside world, and again, mine will do this just on my little local network here in my home office, because I can tell it to use, my router as the default gateway to access the outside world. So I can have just, my PLC here in my office do that. But that's how you do it. All right. That looks like all the questions we've got, guys. Again, we want to thank you for attending the webinar, and we hope to see you on another one again here pretty soon. You guys take care and have a good day. Thanks again.